Everyone, welcome. I'm delighted to have JD with us today. We are fellow Microsoft alums, and I'll let him introduce himself. Over to you, JD.
Thanks,
Welcome.
Bobby. Greatly appreciate you having me with you today. I'm JD Roux. I am a father, a husband, a son, and yes, I also happen to be the Chief People and Culture Officer of IGT, which is International Game Technology.
Beautiful. I love that you opened with that. I've had that on my LinkedIn for a while, starting with dad. So, JD, let's get into how do you define respect in the workplace?
Yeah, I mean, at its most basic level, respect is treating people well, but a bit more broad than that. I consider it a recognition of the value of people, not just as a worker, but as a whole person, both inside and outside of work. And so we can talk about respect in the workplace, but for me, respect is the same just as people.
Yeah, thanks. That theme's been emerging. Lovely. So, how do you know when it's present?
I think when we see that it is present, whether among two people or just in a group, that people are comfortable, that they want to be where they are, and that they feel like they can be themselves and contribute in whatever particular setting that they are in. And so not only are people comfortable and the culture is good, but what we should observe, and I'm more of a business person, we should observe that people are able to achieve more of their potential and their better business outcomes as a result of not just two people, but of a culture being respectful.
Yeah, thanks. And any, deeper sort of examples of that, and you can keep anything confidential out, of course, but just and actually and the impact of that on the whole ecosystem, right? All the different stakeholders involved in a large organization that you manage.
Yeah. So uh, I will talk to more specific stories. I can talk about the academics and the research, but you're as much of an expert on that as I am while I look into it. And so, if we talk on the work side, one of my employers, Bain and Company, which is where I started my career, and while it was not officially stated as a value, I think we all observed and demonstrated respect there. I think it was just assumed, like, while it's not a stated value, like we are all going to be respectful of each other. And it was that appreciation of all people and the role that they played. So Bain and Company is a consulting firm, and so there's like the consulting track, and okay, the consultants get paid more and all of that. But there was an appreciation of everyone that we came across in the environment, whether they were a consultant, whether they were a different professional, a recruiter, someone in janitorial staff, just that feeling that we're all on the same team pretty much. And while we all play different roles on that team, we all have value on it. And I think Bain and Company is recognized for having a particularly high performing culture with high performing individuals. And so you observe it there that no matter where people are in the organization, they're able to achieve more of their potential and perform at their best. And that's definitely what I observed and experienced when I was there.
That's great, JD. I'm really delighted to hear that. The stereotype I think about management firms is, they're so client focused and the pressures are so high that they can be high burnout environments. So I'm really glad to hear that. And did you find, especially because you're more business oriented, did the metrics match up with what your experience was? And for instance, did it mean retaining great talent and attracting great talent because of this differentiator?
Yes, I think not only at Bain, but in similar firms and cultures, the answer is yes. They're very successful economically. I won't go into the details of the private partnership and all the money they were making, right? But for those who are high performers, yeah, they were compensated well, but they wanted to be there, and so the retention is there. And in some of these consulting firms, it's well known that there is an up and out, up or out rather, type of culture. And at least when I was there, Bain was not particularly different. But as long as people were performing well, they tended to choose to go up rather than out. Importantly, I think the out and how it was handled was also very important because I didn't see, and I would assume that it is somewhat rare, that when someone just wasn't a good fit for the firm or the next level, there were all of these programs in place to help people find what the next opportunity was. And it wasn't seen, or at least at that stage of my career, I did not notice as like, oh, you failed, but rather like, okay, it's time for you to move on to the next thing. How are we all going to help you do that? And how can you be a valued alumnus of the firm? Uh, And I think when you treat people well, not only when they're performing well, but maybe when they maybe don't have the capabilities or the motivation that you necessarily expect, it really helps the entire organization.
Yeah, that's huge. I'm really glad that you had that experience. And now I bet that's had an impact on how you lead as a CHRO.
I will say it has, and not only from the respect and the culture point of view, but, and they know this, so much of just what I adopt as an HR leader from performance management to reward systems. I wish I could say it was based on the research, but I do a lot of copying and pasting from my first employer.
They all do. Yeah. No, thanks. All right, let's switch gears and go to when you know that it's not present, when respect is absent or is in friction in a company culture.
I mean, you can tell that respect is absent when people are literally absent. And I've been in those types of companies and cultures as well. And so when respect is lacking and people do not feel valued, the most extreme form of that is people just don't show up. At a minimum, they feel uncomfortable. There is a set of fear, and you've observed it. I have observed it in my career where people are just worried about saying something, really, whether it's they're in front of someone more senior and they feel like they're just there to listen and not really contribute, or just in a broader environment. And when that occurs, then people just naturally don't perform at their best. And so the business outcomes are not necessarily there either. Um, I said the absence is pretty bad, but sometimes uh, misconduct occurs as a result of lack of respect. So not only in the verbal interactions, but other things. And sometimes things can get close to criminal as a result of lack of respect, because things like breaks of policy or breaks of law, they're a reflection, whether intentionally or unintentionally, of not valuing the other person.
Yeah, thanks, JD. And since you've gone there, I'll check on another related piece that I see often and see if you've had the experience of this is holding true to that piece around doing the right thing when something breaks, right? Somebody's broken a policy or has really been out of line. Has it been your experience that you're able to do that at any level? Because there's a lot of looking the other way when it's somebody right at the top. Um, what's that been like?
The appetite of the leadership or the board is really important in this. And in the circumstances in which I personally, as an HR professional, was handling an investigation or a complaint, I feel fortunate where, yes, I've had leadership that has supported me, even at really senior levels, of taking an action up to and including termination. I do feel somewhat fortunate that later on in my career, there was a recognition that we had to do that, right? So it was easier for me to do. As an HR professional who did not handle every investigation and have sometimes looked across the way and heard about things and wondered, like, how is that being handled? Why am I not seeing something? I have had suspicions about, like, did that person get special treatment? Sometimes because of their level, but just as often because of what they quote unquote contribute to the business or to the bottom line. I can't give specific examples of what I've handled, but I have wondered that throughout my career. And I think leaders with more information make really tough ethical decisions about how to handle things. I will also comment, and I'll get into a little bit less of the specifics. There is a tendency, and I'm not just talking about a specific company, although some people will assume I am, in the leadership set, that once you start to see certain behaviors, it's, oh, we know that person. That didn't really happen, right? Or, oh, that might have happened, but that clearly could not have been intentional because we know this person. Versus at the middle or the junior levels where senior leaders like myself are making decisions. And then almost by nature, it's more objective. I don't know that person really well. So I take the findings and a lack of respect at face value, and it's easier for me to make a decision as a result. And even when I start hearing the manager of that person, the team of the person, like, no, 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 you don't understand. It's like, it's easier for me to make that decision.
Yeah, yeah, there's a lot of discernment and sifting through different perspectives, right, in those situations. So how about um, the impact on other stakeholders, right? When those events happen, it's not just those that are directly involved, but there's the immediate teams, perhaps even broader, maybe company wide, depending on the size of the company. How do you navigate that, and what guidance would you have for folks on how to navigate that when that happens?
Yeah.
Because there's a spectrum, right, from very hush hush to very public, somewhere in the middle, messy and gossipy. What would be your mature, guidance on that subject?
So first, I just want to mention a broad range of impacts in terms of managers, leaders who want to do the right thing and ensure a strong culture, a respectful environment, but they feel like they're getting signals that they're not empowered to actually do the right thing. So when we get those intentional or unintentional signals around how we're going to manage things as an organization, it has an impact there. And then, of course, on the broader organization, creates a culture of fear on one side. Well, wait, if these behaviors are allowed, does that mean that's going to happen to me? And then, unfortunately, what I've seen where people say, oh, well, that was okay, so I can do these types of behaviors too. And I've definitely observed that in my career. It's just different stakeholders impacted in different ways, and almost all of them result in negative implications for the culture and negative outcomes. In terms of how I advise people to work through it, uh, as a leader, I just lean on transparency and I try not to make a whole lot of assumptions about what happened or what was intended. I go out and I have conversations, but this isn't just something that I can do as a chief people officer. It's something that any employee can do, is to have a mature conversation. This is different from what you were alluding to around gossiping among an organization and understandably complain about things, but asking a trusted manager or leader, hey, I've heard this, what's your perspective on that? And starting that organizational conversation, without casting someone as guilty who might not be, but starting a conversation about like what is acceptable and unacceptable amongst our people. I find that doesn't happen quite enough, especially in environments where respect might not be as present versus others. It really is contingent upon leaders to initiate that discussion. But even if you're not a mid-level or a senior leader, like having that mature conversation so you can find out what's expected. Now, if you find that organizations are either not valuing the right thing or saying that the value is one thing, but then doing another, then that is a personal, ethical, and economic decision in terms of what you do with that information. Because environments that embrace a lack of respect are just going to attract and retain people who are not particularly respectful, right? So people have to make very personal decisions around whether they stay.
Yeah, thanks. I'm hearing like the ripple effect, and that gossip comment I brought in is just around, again, if there's lack of transparency and fear, that tends to gets messy, versus the clean way you're describing it is actually teaching people how to have those conversations themselves. So the burden doesn't fall just on you and your leadership. Great. So JD, let's get to your top tips, my friend, on how to teach people, how to share with people, your wisdom on the ways to have more respectful workplaces and avoid toxic culture.
So I focus on three things that anyone can do, anyone watching this discussion can do, because as much as we like to say, well, it's for the CEO to do, or for the chief people officer to do, or for the leadership team to do, and that is absolutely true in terms of the impetus of who is responsible. An organization's culture and respect in the workplace really is a responsibility for all of us. And so I know in behavior change, you need to start with really small things that you do repeatedly. And so I try not to do like really huge overarching things that might be tough for people to believe. And so to set the right culture of respect, the first thing is to really recognize that each and every one of us contribute to the culture and we all have a role to play. And some of it is in just the language that we use with each other. And so one of the things I tell my own teams is to be really cautious about the word they. Even when we're talking about, hey, a certain group or individual might be disrespectful, once we start using the word they, no matter how senior, no matter what group we're in, we've already created an us versus them type of environment. And that contributes to tribalism, which I can also lecture about ad nauseum. And ultimately, even if we don't want there to be disrespect, we are contributing to that. And so Really, respect needs to start with WE, not RE. We need to use more of the we and what we are going to do together about it. So that's the first thing that I would share. And I don't know if you have any reactions or questions to that.
No, 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 that's aligning beautifully. Thank you.
Uh, the second thing is, especially in larger populations, things are going to happen that are not expected, and unfortunately also just not acceptable. And negative emotions will occur, not only in the workplace, but in any environment where there is a large group of people. And negative emotions can be confusion, annoyance, anger, distress. We naturally tend to react in certain ways when we feel those negative emotions. And what I encourage everyone is, again, we all have a part to play. Seek to understand why something is happening, why someone might be doing something, or a group might be doing something. And so I've had to learn in my career, and I have not always been good at this, to not jump to conclusion, start using accusatory language, but I have to switch myself, and I still do this today. Start asking questions. So try to ask as many questions as you can. And sometimes those questions are very influential. And so you can either figure out, oh, the intent was not there, or the other side figures out the questions that you're asking. Maybe something can change. It's like, oh, that's interesting. Why are you saying that to me, right? Or what are you intending by making that comment or doing that thing? Um, but once you start to accuse people of anything, things tend to heighten very quickly. And then disrespect also just tends to build upon itself. So that's the second, just kind of easy tip that I have. Even when there aren't particularly negative emotions, as a leader, I just have to not jump to conclusions or believe I have the right answer, but just ask lots of questions of people, except when there's harmful behavior happening right in front of you. And it's not necessarily asking questions. It is either stopping that behavior or finding someone who can stop that behavior. So there are always exceptions to this. And so if you notice like actual harm happen in front of you, then you are a bystander that, or someone experiencing it. We need to stop that first, and then we can ask questions afterwards, essentially. Uh, the third thing, and maybe a little bit less expected from an HR leader who can sometimes be seen as a disciplinarian, right? And I've already focused on when the bad things happen, this is what we do. I find that in culture and building an environment of respect, we do focus a lot on the negative and we don't focus enough on recognition and really demonstrating to everyone, like, that's an example of a person or a group who is doing the right thing. And we really value that. And maybe there's a reward for it, right? But when we're talking about behavior change, positive reinforcement is always going to be better than punishment, because once you get to punishment, you're a bit too late. And if the HR person's coming in and setting down all the rules of what to do, it actually contributes to fear a bit, right? So in a culture, it's even better when you can very visibly provide recognition. And so if we do, in my opinion, these three things, it's not the totality of what is required to build a respectful culture, but these are things that everyone can do. And hopefully there are people like me that are thinking even more broadly and focusing more of their time on building the right culture.
Yeah, JD, those are fantastic. And really, yeah, fresh perspectives. Thank you. I'm always looking for, turning this simple concept of respect in as many ways as possible. Well, I really appreciate your insights. I'm sure our audience will really enjoy it. Have a great day, JD.
Thank you, Bobby. Appreciate it.